Hey, yo! Omar Khan got his guy, DK Metcalf, for the 58th pick in the draft, $18 million cap hit this year, 4-year, $132 million contract on top of that starting next season. So a cap hit of $33 million in each of the 4 years after this year. It's the biggest trade in Steelers history. It's the biggest cap hit they've ever paid a player in team history. TJ Watt's up near $30 million this season. Ben Roethlisberger's highest cap hit, $26 million, Dorin. This is now going to be the highest paid player in the history of the franchise. And my number one takeaway, there's a lot of questions that come with this and a lot of offshoots and angles, and we'll get to all of them, I promise. But my biggest takeaway is, hey, Steelers, get with the times, spend money on offense. Oh, my God, the Steelers, Dorin, they got with the times. They spent money on offense. How you feeling about this?
I mean, said it last week that this is transcending. It would change the whole identity of the Steelers. I really did. Saying if they got DK Metcalf, figuring how they could get a guy like that changes everything. This is a guy that they were missing last year, and we can get into all that throughout the 4 hours of the show of if DK Metcalf was on the Steelers last year. Whenever George Pickens went down, you still had that number one wide receiver. Like, he's number one.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is a number one guy.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't a number two. This isn't a 1A. This is number one. I mean, he's a top 5 wide receiver in the league. So, I mean, this changes everything. It really does. There's so many angles to this that the first angle I think that I will start with, and then we'll break down DK throughout the show.
Yeah,
like,
go wherever you want to go,
things.
big guy.
Like, now, this becomes a sexy destination for a quarterback. I mean, it really does. It went from being the worst situation that, like, why the hell would I want to go to Pittsburgh to throw to who? To throw to George Pickens, who gets mad every single play, to now, I can throw to George Pickens and DK Metcalf. That changes a lot. It changes a lot, and it does put the pressure on the quarterbacks that are out there that could be a possible Steeler within the next coming days. But, I mean, this trade is going for it. And, we didn't know how the Steelers were going to end up this year. It wasn't looking great. Wasn't looking great this free agency period, and then it's like, okay, we go into the draft, and maybe you get a quarterback and kind of bottom out a little bit, and then go back to the draft next year to try to rebuild. I mean, we've talked about that, but this tells us, we're in this fight, baby. We're ready to roll. We're ready to compete with this division. We are trying to go for it. We'll see what they do at quarterback, but this is one of the biggest moves in program history, in franchise history.
And you got $47 million still in cap space. You can get more than that with some deft restructuring, which is what Omar Khan's really good at. Omar Khan is outstanding at the manipulation of the salary cap. So whatever you want the Steelers to do, it's still on the table. If you are one of these people, and I don't know how many of you are out there that want the Steelers to get Aaron Rodgers, they could. If you are in the Sam Darnold camp, they could do that. If you want, like me, them to get Justin Fields back, because then you'll even have more money to spend, well, now all of a sudden you become a more enticing place for him. Maybe the Jets are going to be willing to pay Justin Fields more money than you are, but where's the best opportunity for you to stick and become a franchise quarterback in the NFL? Maybe it still is New York, because they've got Garrett Wilson, they've got Breece Hall. But you can make the argument now that it's Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Because you've got DK Metcalf, and at least for the time being, you've got George Pickens. Does this mean they can trade George Pickens? All valid questions, which we will get into over the course of the show. Will Mike Tomlin actually now allow his quarterback to play offense? We heard Omar Khan at the Combine say, in modern football, you got to score points. This is a move that backs up what his mouth was saying. Is the head coach on board? Things generally don't happen here unless the coach signs off on stuff. So he wanted DK Metcalf. All angles that we are going to get to. But here is the biggest thing. You don't get DK Metcalf, even with all the questions that come with it, and it's a bad thing. It's a very good thing, Dorin. It makes them better this year. And the fact that he's 27 years old, and you're going to have him now for the next 5 years. If Justin Fields is the quarterback, you give him the best opportunity to succeed. If it's Russell Wilson, you're going to have a better chance to succeed this year than you did last season. If neither one of those guys work out, then the next quarterback who walks in here, if it's a Jackson Dart, if it's a Jalen Milroe this year, I'm just throwing names out there. If it's quarterback X, Y, or Z next year, they're walking into Pittsburgh knowing that they're throwing the ball to DK Metcalf.
Yes.
And the nest that I've talked about so often that you're trying to build for the quote-unquote next quarterback just got way, way, way better.
If there's a next quarterback, you're throwing a DK Metcalf that's under 30 years old, too.
That's right.
Like, that's the thing. Let's talk about DK Metcalf, the player.
Yes.
We talked about so many times last year, Crowley, where it's like, who scares you on the Steelers offense? Like, who keeps you up? If you're a D coordinator and you're game planning and you're playing the Steelers this week, like, who keeps you up at night? Well, who's changing the way that you play defense because they're such a threat? That's what DK Metcalf is. DK Metcalf is such a threat that he changes the way that you will play defense. If he's on the outside, you got to know he's out there. Like, you got to pay attention. You got to double cover at times, and then that opens up everybody else. They didn't have that guy last year. Now, George Pickens at times, he could have been that guy, and he probably was at times, but this is a whole nother brand of football that the Steelers are going to have to pay. They're going to have to play and pay for.
I joked about this last week, Dorin, that if you had DK Metcalf and George Pickens, you're a defensive back, and there's a tip ball at the line of scrimmage, and it pops up in the air. You're probably thinking twice about picking it off because you're going to get murdered.
Yep.
DK Metcalf will kill you, and George Pickens is going to start peeling off other guys behind the play. Is Mike Tomlin going to be able to deal with both of these guys on the roster at the same time? That's another question. I mean, this is one of the most combustible wide receiver rooms in the NFL that we've ever seen as it sits today. From a talk show host standpoint, keep them both.
Yeah. I mean, this is the best problem to have. Like, if I were a coach, I want two guys that are like this, that want to compete for the ball. That want the ball, because then that tells me that some guy is eating, some guy obviously is mad that they aren't eating, they want to eat some more. That means that we're playing good offense usually, or I mean, it could go backwards where there isn't any targets and you could play the archaic style of offense that the Steelers have. But I think that if you're Zach Hazzani, you have your hands full. You have your hands full, but you're happy that this is the situation. How much coaching do you really have to do with DK Metcalf? You just got to keep him on a straight and narrow a little bit. He's not like a bad, cancerous player.
He is finished product George Pickens.
Yeah.
He's what ideally you would want George Pickens to turn into. He's a more consistent, I think, George Pickens.